The kingdom of Valmar was shining that day. The sky was clear and bright, and the air carried the smell of flowers from the royal gardens. Birds flew above tall towers made of white stone and glass. The flags of the Queen waved gently from every window. Citizens lined the streets, talking in low voices, curious about the visitor who had arrived from the border. It was not just anyone. It was Captain Ethan Ward, a man known for bravery and loyalty during the hardest years of war. Ethan walked slowly through the main gates, his coat heavy with dust from travel. He was not used to such quietness. For years, he had lived among soldiers and machines, not marble walls or soft music from the palace gardens. His boots echoed as he crossed the grand courtyard. He could feel the eyes of guards and nobles on him. Some were suspicious. Others were amazed. After all, no officer from the Republic had ever been invited to the royal palace since the long war ended, but the Queen herself had called for him. He stopped beside the fountain in the center of the courtyard. The water glowed in the sunlight, falling in perfect circles. The soldiers around him stood straight, hands on their rifles. Then, the tall doors opened, and she stepped out. Queen Isabel moved with calm grace, her white gown shining faintly under the sun. Her crown was simple, yet her presence filled the air with quiet power. Everyone bowed as she passed. Ethan bent his head too, unsure of the right way to greet a queen. Years of war had not taught him how to stand before royalty. Behind her walked Princess Alina, the only child of the queen. Her hair fell like silver down her back. She carried a silver tablet in her hand, typing notes as she followed her mother. Her face showed both kindness and sharp intelligence. When her eyes met Ethan's, something happened, something that made the noise of the courtyard fade away. For a small second, Alina looked at him with surprise, then wonder. It was the look of someone seeing a memory come to life. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest, though he could not explain why. He had never met her before. He was sure of it, yet there was something familiar in her bright eyes. Queen Isabel stopped a few feet from him. "Captain Ethan Ward," she said softly. "Welcome to Valmar. You have come far." Ethan nodded, his voice steady, though his heart was uneasy. "Your Majesty, it is an honor. I bring goodwill from the Republic and hopes for peace." The Queen studied his face for a moment. "Your people and mine have spent too many years apart. It is time we speak, not fight." Her words carried a calm strength, but her eyes were sharp. Ethan could sense she was testing him, measuring his intentions. Around them, palace officials whispered and watched, ready to judge every word and gesture. But Isabel raised one hand, and silence quickly returned. "I will speak with you later in the council hall," she said. "For now, please rest. You must be tired." Ethan bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty." As he straightened and stepped back, his eyes met Alina's once more. She looked thoughtful, almost emotional, as if some memory had returned to her mind. Ethan turned away, confused by her expression but unable to ask. He was led to a guest chamber at the edge of the royal wing. The halls were filled with light and soft music, so calm it made him uneasy. Every sound of his boots reminded him that he was an outsider in a world built on rules and grace. When evening came, Ethan stood at the balcony of his chamber, watching the sunset over the royal gardens. The sky glowed orange and red, reflecting off the pools below. Children laughed, somewhere near the gates. For a moment he felt something he had not known in years: peace, simple and warm, but it did not last long. His mind drifted back to the last war. Flames, smoke, and screams filled his memory. He remembered the night he carried a small girl out of a burning building in a border town. She had held his neck tight and whispered, "Don't let go." He never knew who she was or what became of her. The memory still returned in his dreams, every time he looked at a sunrise that was too quiet. Now staring over the gardens, Ethan wondered why the Queen of Valmar herself had called for him after so many years. What could she want from a soldier who belonged on battlefields, not in marble halls? And why had the young princess looked at him with such sorrowful knowing in her eyes? Down in the courtyard, the Queen's banners waved gently in the wind. Ethan knew something was beginning, a story larger than peace treaties or old memories. He just didn't know yet that destiny had already tied his life to the royal family long before this day. The next morning in the royal palace began quietly. The air was soft and cool, and the first golden light of the day poured through high windows. Captain Ethan Ward woke early, as he had done all his life. Years of discipline never left a soldier, even when the war was long over. He washed, dressed, and stood by the balcony again, watching the city come alive. Down below, servants carried baskets, guards changed shifts, and the people of Valmer opened their shops. It was peaceful and bright, unlike the smoke and metal towns he had known. Soon, a young messenger arrived at his door. The boy bowed quickly and said, "Captain Ward, Her Majesty asks you to join her in the west courtyard after breakfast." Ethan thanked him and followed through tall corridors lined with paintings of old kings and queens. Their painted eyes seemed to follow him, serious and silent. We could almost hear their message, "Be careful who you trust." When he stepped into the courtyard, the queen was there already. She did not wear a crown but a simple blue dress, as if she wanted to meet him as a woman, not a ruler. Princess Alina stood nearby, speaking quietly to one of the royal tutors. Her voice carried a calm rhythm, but she looked distracted, as if she was thinking of something else entirely. When Ethan appeared, she froze for a second. Then she smiled softly and excused herself from the tutor. Queen Isabel turned and greeted him. "Captain Ward, I hope you rested well." "I did, Your Majesty," he said. "Your palace is the most peaceful place I have ever seen." "Peace can be strange to soldiers," she said with a faint smile. "You learn to wait for the noise after silence." Ethan looked at her and nodded. "Yes, Your Majesty. Silence can make us uneasy." She studied him with eyes that missed nothing. "I asked you here because I wished to speak of the past. The war left deep wounds between your republic and my kingdom. Many still believe we cannot trust each other. But I believe peace begins with truth." "I agree," Ethan said simply. "Truth is harder to find than victory." Before she could reply, Princess Alina stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but slightly trembling. "Mother, Captain Ward saved my life once." Ethan blinked, taken by surprise. He wanted to speak, but no words came out. Queen Isabel looked sharply at her daughter. "What do you mean, Alina?" The young princess turned to Ethan, her eyes searching his face. "You do not remember me, do you? 10 years ago, in the ruins near the southern border, a soldier carried me out of a burning building. The fire was everywhere, and he was hurt, but he kept running until we reached the river. I was only a child, but I remember his voice telling me not to look back. He said I would see home again. That soldier was you." The courtyard fell silent. Even the birds above seemed to stop singing. Ethan felt a heavy rush of memories flood through him. The fire, the smoke, the frightened child holding his neck so tightly he could hardly breathe. Yes, he remembered. How could he forget? Slowly he said, "I remember a little girl with courage greater than the flames. I tried to find out who she was, but the records were lost. I never knew it was you, Princess." The queen looked between them, her calm mask cracking. She stepped down from the garden steps and faced Ethan directly. "You carried my daughter out of the fire that night?" "I did what anyone would have done," Ethan said quietly. "Not anyone," she said softly. "That night, we believed no one from the Republic would cross the border to help our people. You risked your life when peace between our lands did not exist." He bowed his head. "Sometimes the line between enemies disappears when a child cries for help." The queen said no more, but her eyes shone with a deep light of respect and confusion. Alina was looking at him with tears that she tried to hide. The moment hung heavy and real between them, like a door opening between different worlds. After a pause, the queen spoke again with careful tone. "I want you to stay in Valmer for some days, Captain. You will dine with us tonight. There are things we must speak of beyond old wars." Ethan nodded, uncertain of her purpose, but aware that something bigger was now in motion. The trust of a queen was not easily given, especially when the blood of enemies still marked history's pages. He bowed and said, "As you wish, Your Majesty." When he turned to leave, he heard the queen whisper something to her daughter, too low for him to understand. Alina looked at him once more, her face full of questions and memories that time had not erased. Later that day, Ethan sat alone in the guest chamber, turning his old officer badge over in his hands. He remembered the night of the fire clearly now. The little girl had promised that someday she would repay his kindness, and he had laughed at her bravery. He never guessed she would become the daughter of the queen. Outside, the bells of Valmar rang in the distance. Peace had returned to the kingdom, but in Ethan's mind, the past was alive again. Walking beside him like a shadow that refused to rest, he knew that dinner that night would change everything, though he could not yet tell whether it would lead him toward mercy or danger. The evening sun painted the palace walls with gold. Lamps were being lit in the long halls, and the smell of fresh bread drifted from the royal kitchen. Captain Ethan Ward, dressed in a plain uniform, clean but not grand. He looked at his reflection for a moment, uneasy in a place of riches and grace. He had been invited to dine with the queen and her daughter. It was an honor few soldiers of the Republic could ever imagine. A servant guided him through shining corridors until they reached a long dining room. The windows faced the sunset, and soft light lay over a table filled with silver dishes and crystal glasses. Queen Isabel sat at the end, calm and proud as always. Princess Alina sat beside her, her eyes bright with warmth when she saw him enter. "Welcome, Captain Ward," said the queen. "Please, sit with us. Tonight there will be no talk of borders or treaties. Let us share a meal as people, not as rulers or soldiers." Ethan bowed lightly and took the seat offered to him. He felt out of place among such beauty, but tried not to show it. The meal began. The queen spoke about her gardens, about rebuilding towns, and about the hope for lasting peace. Ethan answered politely, though his mind kept returning to what Alina had said that morning. The memory of saving her long ago had stirred old feelings, ones he had buried under years of duty. After a while, Alina broke the quiet. "Mother, may I ask the captain about his service?" The queen nodded. Alina turned to Ethan. "You fought in the southern fields, did you not?" "Yes," he said. "It was the hardest war I ever saw." The air itself seemed to burn. Alina lowered her gaze. "I remember the smoke. I remember the screams. I always thought of the man who carried me through it." Her voice softened. "That was you. You were covered in ash and blood, but you kept running. I never forgot your voice." Ethan felt his throat tighten, but he spoke calmly. "I never forgot that night. I never forgot the little girl who tried to calm me while the world burned around us." The queen looked at both of them, her calm slowly turning to deep thought. "You spoke of truth this morning, Captain. Now we have found one truth already, that destiny sometimes ties lives together before we understand why." For a few moments, no one spoke. Then she continued, "But you must know something else. The night you saved my daughter, the fighting near the river was not by chance. Someone wanted to destroy that town to force the war to continue. Those who planned it were from both sides. Even in peace, there are still men who profit from fear." Ethan looked up quickly. "You believe someone from the Republic helped cause that fire?" "I do," she said quietly. "My advisors uncovered old reports, but the names were erased. Too many secrets hide in the dust of old wars." He was silent. He had suspected as much once, but having the queen say it aloud made it real. "If such men still hold power," he said after a pause, "then peace is only a mask." "Perhaps you can help uncover the truth," the queen said. "You were there. You saw what most did not. If we can prove who caused that fire, our people may finally heal." Ethan thought of the soldiers he had served with, of friends who had died believing in honor. He felt the same anger rise again, but he kept his voice steady. "If I can help make peace real, I will. It's not for nations, but for those who lost everything left behind in those ruins." The queen's expression softened. "Then you are a rare man, Captain." The rest of the meal passed with slow, careful words, yet a quiet understanding grew among them. When dinner ended, the queen excused herself, leaving Alina and Ethan to walk in the garden paths under the silver lamps. The air smelled of jasmine, and small fountains whispered softly among the flowers. Alina spoke after a long silence. "When I was a child, I dreamed that one day I would find you and thank you. But now that I have, it feels like the past is calling us to do something more." Ethan looked ahead at the moonlight on the water. "The past doesn't fade," he said. "It waits for us to face it." She smiled faintly. "Then we will face it together." He wanted to tell her that he was only a soldier, that she belonged to another world. But her voice carried such quiet strength that he could not answer with doubts. The night settled softly around them, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he belonged somewhere. As they parted near the garden steps, Ethan looked back at the palace bathed in silver light. Somewhere inside, the queen was watching from her window, deep in thought. She had seen the spark between them, the bond that fate had written long ago. In her heart she knew the truth she could not yet speak, that the man standing in her courtyard had once carried her daughter out of fire, and perhaps now he was meant to carry the future of their world as well. Night passed slowly in the palace of Elmar. Captain Ethan Ward lay awake long after the lamps were out. The queen's words repeated in his mind like the ticking of a distant clock. There were men from both sides who wanted the war to continue. The fire that destroyed the border town had not been an accident. He had saved the princess that night, but maybe many others had not been saved because of hidden orders. The truth pressed heavy on his chest. By morning, he had decided he needed answers. When he entered the breakfast hall, Queen Isabel and Princess Alina were already there. Queen looked tired, as if she too had not slept. Alina gave him a small smile that showed both kindness and worry. The queen began softly. "Captain Ward, I have thought through the night. I believe the time has come to act. There are papers in the royal archives that might tell us more about what happened during the border fire. The advisors have asked me not to open them, but I trust you. You may look at them yourself." Ethan was surprised. "You are allowing me to see royal documents, Your Majesty?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, because I believe your heart is honest. Alina will guide you. Only she and the headkeeper have the keys to the lower records." Alina looked proud, but nervous. "We will start after the morning court, Mother." So it was decided. When the queen left for the Hall of Public Petitions, Ethan followed Alina through narrow stairways that wound down into the older parts of the palace. The air grew cooler and carried the smell of stone and dust. Old lamps flickered along the walls. At the end of the passage, a heavy metal door waited. Alina unlocked it with care. The room inside was wide and filled with rows of stone shelves. Scrolls, books, and digital tablets rested side by side, some wrapped in fine cloth, others old and broken. Time seemed to stand still there. "We keep every royal record here," Alina explained quietly. "Yes. Every order, every secret report. No one comes here unless they must." They began to search through files from the time of the war. Hours passed. Dust settled on their hands. Most of what they found were reports about supply lines, weapon counts, and communications between commanders. But then, Alina found a small folder sealed with black wax. "This one has no mark of the royal office," she said. Ethan opened it slowly. Inside were 3 letters written in code and a list of names. Some of the names were soldiers from his own unit. His heart stopped. "These men were under me," he muttered. Alina stared at the list. "What does it mean?" "It means someone inside the Republic traded information with someone here," he said. "They arranged the attack that burned that town. It was planned to make both sides blame each other and keep the war alive." She looked at him in shock. "Then peace was never meant to happen." "Not then," he said. "We can change that now." A soft sound broke the silence. Footsteps outside the door. Ethan motioned for quiet. The door creaked open. The headkeeper entered, holding a lamp. He stopped when he saw them. His face turned pale. "Your Grace," he said to Alina, "you were not to come here without the Queen's guard." "We were sent by the Queen herself," Alina replied calmly. The old man's hands shook. "It is dangerous to hold those papers. As many would kill to keep them buried." Ethan saw fear, not guilt, in the man's eyes. "Who would do that?" he asked. But the keeper only whispered, "Power does not forgive truth," and left quickly, closing the door behind him. Alina turned to Ethan. "We must show this to my mother." He nodded, folding the letters and slipping them inside his coat. "Not yet," he said quietly. "If the wrong eyes see them before the Queen does, someone will try to stop us. We will go when night falls." That evening, a storm moved across the city, rain striking the palace roofs. The Queen called for both of them to join her in her private sitting room. When they entered, she saw the look in their eyes and knew they had found something. Ethan laid the folded papers on the table. "We found proof, Your Majesty. The war continued because men from both lands made it so. Soldiers died for lies." The Queen read the pages slowly. The room was quiet, except for the rain. When she finished, she looked at Ethan and Alina, her face filled with sorrow and pride. "The truth has waited too long in silence," she said. "If this becomes known, some in my court will turn against me. But the people deserve peace built on honesty, not on false stories." Ethan said. Then we will stand with you, whatever comes. The queen rose and stepped to the tall window. Lightning lit the sky, and her voice was steady. Then we begin. Tomorrow, the council will meet. We'll tell them everything. Let the truth burn brighter than the war ever did. Ethan and Alina exchanged a glance, both knowing that by the next sunrise, the palace would no longer be the same. The next morning came with gray clouds rolling across the sky. The kingdom of Valmar was quiet, almost too quiet. It was the day the queen had chosen to face her council and tell them the truth about the war. Captain Ethan Ward looked out of his window and saw the city waking slowly. The towers stood tall above the mist, and the bells rang through the chilly air. He took a deep breath. Soon the truth would rise with those bells, and everything would change. When he walked into the main hall, guards stood along the marble walls, their faces tense. The air was heavy with waiting. Queen Isabel sat on her high chair at the end of the room. She wore no crown today, only a simple robe of dark blue. Princess Alina stood by her side, calm but firm, her hands folded in front of her. Ethan bowed and took his place near her. The council members entered one by one. There were 12 of them, dressed in fine robes, their voices low and sharp. They sat in a half-circle around the queen. When everyone was seated, she rose. "My friends," she said clearly, her voice echoing through the wide hall, "it has been 10 years since we ended the longest war in our history. We have lived in peace, but peace built on half-truths cannot stand forever. Yesterday we found proof that the fire which destroyed the border town, the fire that took so many lives, was not caused by enemies. It was planned." The room filled with shocked murmurs. Men looked at one another with disbelief. The queen lifted her hand and silence fell. "These letters," she continued, pointing to the papers on the table before her, "show that traitors lived among us and in the Republic. They worked together to keep war alive for their own gain. They planned the destruction that took my people and nearly took my daughter. They lied to both crowns." The oldest counselor stood. "Your Majesty," he said, "you cannot bring this forward. It will tear the peace apart." The queen met his eyes calmly. "Peace built on lies is not peace. It is only quiet fear. I will not rule a kingdom built on falsehood." Some of the council members nodded, but others looked angry. One man whispered to another, and Ethan noticed the movement of a hand at his belt. Years of battle had taught him what to look for. He stepped forward just as the man pulled a small weapon from beneath his robe. The motion was quick, meant for the queen. Ethan moved faster. He struck the man's wrist and sent the weapon clattering to the floor. Guards rushed forward and seized the attacker. The hall broke into noise and confusion. The queen stood still, her eyes wide but steady. When the guards dragged the man away, she turned to the others. "You see why the truth must come to light," she said. "Even now, those who profited from the war try to silence it." The room grew quiet again. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Princess Alina turned to the council. "The truth does not take lives," she said softly. "It saves them. My mother and I both saw those fires as children. I will never forget the man who saved me from them. Today we have the chance to save each other in a different way." Her voice was calm but powerful. The nobles looked at her with new respect. Perhaps they saw the next leader of Valmar standing in front of them, young and brave. Ethan stepped forward and said simply, "I fought for duty once. Now I stand for truth. The Republic will not turn against you for this. If we both show honesty, there will be no walls left between us." The queen nodded. "Then it is decided. The council will record these findings. Tomorrow, the truth will be made public." It was done. After so many years, the shadows of the war had begun to fade. Later that evening, as the rain cleared and the stars appeared, Ethan walked in the garden with Alina. The flowers were wet from the storm, shining under the lamps. "Everything will change now," she said quietly. "Yes," he answered. "But change is not always loss." She looked at him with a small smile. "Do you ever regret saving me that night?" "Never," he said. "It was the one right thing I did in those long years." She stood close to him for a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother says fate has strange ways of repaying kindness." He smiled, looking at the lights of the palace reflecting off the wet stones. "Then I should thank fate for leading me here again." From a high window, Queen Isabel watched them both. In her heart there was pride, love, and relief. The truth was no longer buried. The man who had once saved her child had now saved her kingdom. As the night deepened, the wind carried the sound of bells across the city. It was a soft sound, not of alarm, but of hope. And somewhere in that quiet music, the Queen's words from long ago seemed to whisper again, "Peace is not born from silence, but from courage." Ethan looked toward the stars and felt the weight of the past lift from him at last. The world he had once tried to save with a rifle he had now helped save with honesty. The war had ended years ago, but true peace had begun that night in the heart of Valmir.